Have you ever felt like your mind is a browser tab that simply refuses to close, processing information at a speed that nobody else seems to keep up with? So many people spend their entire lives carrying an invisible weight, a constant state of mental overload, believing the problem is a lack of discipline, when in reality your brain might simply be operating on a completely different operating system. There is a major debate that science has finally begun to unravel. What we often dismiss as strangeness might actually be the clearest sign of ADHD autism, or the complex intersection of both within the same brain. If you feel like a genius when it comes to intricate details, yet you find yourself completely paralyzed by the simple task of washing the dishes, this video is going to hand you the manual that the world forgot to give you about your own neurodivergence. Living with the sensation of a racing mind is like trying to organize a vast library during a constant earthquake. Oftentimes, this mental overload isn't just exhaustion. It's the latent signal of ADHD autism, or the coexistence of both. This general lack of understanding makes you feel like an outsider, when in truth, your brain just processes the world through a different lens. Understanding your neurodivergence is the very first step in trading guilt for strategy, and finally mastering your own game. The world tends to label ADHD and autism only by what is visible on the surface, such as classic restlessness or social withdrawal. But this limited vision completely ignores the explosive creativity and the mental depth of those who see what everyone else misses. The true magic happens in your ability to spot unique patterns and in your profound empathy for the subtle things in life. By looking past the obvious, you'll discover that your brain isn't a mistake. It's a high perception tool. Many people believe that ADHD is strictly about children running around a classroom. But the truth is that the chaos is usually internal. For many, especially those facing a late diagnosis, what actually manifests is a significant difficulty with focus and an exhausting emotional sensitivity. Creativity and out-of-the-box thinking are the ultimate assets for those living with such an electric and vibrant mind. By embracing this way of functioning, you stop trying to fit into rigid molds and start using your humor and unique vision as your greatest allies. People often overlook autism symptoms because they expect obvious, stereotypical signs, but the spectrum often hides behind a quiet social anxiety. Masking is an incredibly draining tool that you use to appear normal, all while dealing with a brutal sensory overload internally. Your secret weapon lies in your hyperfocus and an analytical capacity that solves complex problems with surgical precision. Once you understand that your need for routine is actually a protective strategy, you transform what was once fear into an unshakable focus. When ADHD and autism coexist, sensory overload becomes a constant background noise that defies any attempt at organization. You live in a perpetual tug-of-war between the craving for novelty and the panic of disorder, generating an exhausting mental overload. This combination can bring along associated conditions such as anxiety and irregular sleep patterns, making it difficult for your electric brain to ever truly rest. Understanding that your hyperfocus can be your refuge helps you balance the chaos and find peace in the middle of the storm. The union of high creativity with deep empathy creates a perspective on the world that very few can ever reach. You possess an almost instinctive ability to see details and unique patterns where others see only noise or clutter. This unconventional thinking is exactly what allows you to solve impossible problems with solutions that no one else could even imagine. Your neurodivergence isn't just a way of being. It is a source of disruptive intelligence that is desperately needed in the world today. The modern world simply wasn't designed for those who deal with constant sensory overload in noisy or chaotic environments. Simple tasks, like organizing a diary or popping to the shops, can generate a sense of confusion that drains your entire energy reserve. This constant feeling of being too much is exhausting. But remember, the problem lies within the environment, not within your brain. Identifying your limits and adjusting your surroundings is the key to transforming that exhaustion into a more fluid and respectful routine. Imagine someone who interrupts a conversation simply because they are terrified of forgetting the idea. That is ADHD fighting against a struggling working memory. On the other hand, absolute silence born from social insecurity might be autism processing every single detail of the interaction before reacting. Both individuals are dealing with intense internal mental overload, yet the external manifestations follow opposite and complex paths. Understanding these dynamics helps you develop self-compassion when the world demands a performance that simply isn't yours to give. The freeze response happens when an excess of stimuli, like bright lights or too many decisions, effectively shuts down your system. This isn't laziness. It is your brain reaching the absolute limit of sensory overload and requiring an immediate reboot to function again. When you feel paralyzed in front of a task, it's your neurodivergence asking for less noise and more clarity. Respecting this recharge time is what separates those who live in burnout from those who learn to manage their energy with true intelligence. With ADHD, your mind is pulled outwards, constantly seeking movement and novelty to satisfy the hunger of a brain that bores easily. With autism, the pull is inwards, prioritizing order, depth, and control over a world that feels far too intense. When both coexist, you live in a constant internal conflict between the explorer's chaos and the absolute need for predictability. Learning to balance these two forces is what allows you to transform that friction into a unique and highly differentiated intellectual power. The modern world was not built to house brains that operate outside of linearity, which makes your journey a true challenge of resilience. Understanding that your neurodivergence is a valuable trait and not a factory defect completely changes your relationship with the mirror. Acceptance begins the moment you swap the effort of fixing yourself for the compassion of understanding yourself deeply. By validating your way of processing life, you make room for the world to also start seeing the power that exists within your difference. If you identified with these signs, seeking a diagnosis, even a late diagnosis, could be the key that unlocks every door to self-understanding. Speaking with professionals who specialize in ADHD and autism isn't about labeling your mind. It's about finding the right tools for your unique way of working. You remember that this process is deeply individual and should not be rushed by external pressures to be constantly productive. The focus now is learning to work with your own brain, transforming difficulty with focus into a personalized and functional life strategy. You don't need to prove your validity to anyone. The mere fact that your brain processes the world in such a unique way is already your greatest contribution. Your differences are not flaws. They are exactly what brings a new layer of value, creativity, and innovation to a world that is often gray and linear. I encourage you to seek out your community and share your experiences, as it is through the connection with other neurodivergent people that healing and acceptance grow strong. Always remember, being different is not a burden, and it is having the courage to see what the majority cannot yet perceive. After everything we have explored today, I leave you with an invitation. Are you going to keep trying to fit into a box that was never your size? Or are you finally going to embrace the power of your neurodivergence? Look back and see how many times your creativity and your hyperfocus have saved you, proving that you possess a high-performance engine that only ever needed the correct instruction manual. The path to a life without the guilt of mental overload begins now. With your decision to prioritize yourself and understand how your brain truly works, reflect on this. And if this content brought the clarity you were looking for, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We are building a community here that doesn't just accept, but celebrates every unique mind.